What I'd like to do is introduce Kurt Engelman. Kurt is the president of the National Institute for Direct Instruction, NIFTY, and is the son, surprisingly, of Zig Engelman. Kurt has been at the helm of NIFTY for 20 years, I think now, or so. Does an outstanding job of helping our implementation managers, project directors, do what they need to do to assist the schools. I would like to point out that his current crowning achievement is that he's recently published his first book of what we imagine will be many, many more, but it's Direct Instruction, a Practitioner's Handbook. It's really gotten some great reviews. It's a very comprehensive look at what it takes to have a successful direct instruction implementation, along with some great background information about what direct instruction is, some defining kinds of information, and so we have copies of that available in the NIFTY bookstore, and he will be available for book signing on Thursday from 11:45 till 12:30. We still have to give him a half hour more to get his lunch in, but meet with Kurt then and get your copy of the book autographed. So I'd like to bring Kurt Engelman on up to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker. And I would say, which Kurt probably would have covered anyway, unfortunately our keynote speaker, Casey Sovo, was not, he was flying in from Minot, South Dakota, and if we say, why not Minot, and encountered the ire of the travel gods and was not able to make it here today, but he'll be over there on that screen via Zoom in a few moments. So here is Kurt.
Thank you very much, Brian. Yes. Give me that mic, exactly. It's great to have you all here for the 50th. So, as you can imagine, there have been 49 previous conferences, and just for your information, Mr. Brian Wickman has organized and managed 46 of those 49 previous ones. Yeah, let's give him a big round of applause. And also for Gray Canada and everyone else who's helped organize this conference. Also, folks, we have people here who have been at the very first Direct Instruction Conference in Eugene, and I know it includes some Hall of Famers, Direct Instruction Hall of Famers, including my fraternal twin brother out there in the hall. So if you could all stand up if you were here for the very first Direct Instruction Conference. Stand up and be recognized. That represents a lifetime of support, of dedication in support of things that work for children. Yes, thanks for standing. Okay, folks, for this landmark event, we wanted to find a speaker, a keynote speaker, who is a successful practitioner of direct instruction. We wanted someone who knows the direct instruction methodology, has used it successfully, especially for at-risk children, implemented it school-wide, and is knowledgeable about how long and how much effort it takes to implement direct instruction well, but in so doing, in fact, all children can succeed. So we're very pleased that our keynote speaker fits the bill for that and much more. He came here to the conference, learned the direct instruction methodology, and used it on some of the most vulnerable students in our country. He has supervised, overseen the implementation of DI in multiple schools in the Bureau of Indian Education system with great effect. And probably one of the things that's most impressive about Mr. Casey Sovo is that he kept his eye on the welfare of kids over many, many years, because these schools were wildly successful, had great academic gains, and then over time the direct instruction implementation lost focus. He has been successful in redirecting the adults to do what's best for kids, re-implement direct instruction, and again, student performance has started to increase. Raise your hand if you saw the interview with Casey Sovo on the Direct Instruction podcast hosted by Zach Groeschel. There are a few of you over there. We will email you a link to that podcast. There's a whole series of great interviews, and that is one of my favorite. Well, I hope that you find Casey's story inspirational and thought-provoking. Thought-provoking because if the students at the schools that he and his team support can be that successful with direct instruction, then guess what? Your students can be successful also if you implement direct instruction with fidelity. So this is a bit of a strange homecoming for Casey because he received his initial training here in direct instruction at the conference and has taken a wide variety of trainings and institutes. And so this was going to be a big homecoming for him, to come back after all these years and do it in person. But he will have a very good and strong message, and I see that he's successful there. So everyone, please put your hands together for our 2024 keynote speaker, Mr. Casey Sovo.
Bonjour, Anin. Dinawe Magani Dug. Ogima Nagig Indigenikas. Ozwatang Inda. Marueka Nananiatsa Gusinoyos para Pixi. Casey Sovo. Ixa Tuika Namana Nation, Namana Oklahoma. Ixa Puraivo. Dubakani. CP Singh, Belcourt, North Dakota, Bureau of Indian Education. Good morning to all of my relations. I come to you in a good way, and thank you for being here. In Ojibwe, I'm known as the leader of the Otters, and I work for the Bureau of Indian Education in Belcourt, North Dakota, which is located on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indian reservations in north central North Dakota. I'm Comanche from Oklahoma and St. Regis Mohawk from upstate New York. And I've been working for the Bureau of Indian Education since 2001, but most recently in Belcourt, North Dakota from 2019. And today I want to share with you some of the work that we've been doing using direct instruction to change our student outcomes since 2020. And I'm going to focus on 2020 to 2024 in this talk and give you an Indigenous perspective on direct instruction. But before we get too deep into it, I want to share with you a little bit about the Bureau of Indian Education, just in case you're unfamiliar with our organization, and quite possibly you may not even know that we exist. But it's our mission to provide education to students from Indigenous nations all across the country. There are 574 Indigenous nations, and the Bureau of Indian Education has schools in 23 different states. We have schools from Maine to Florida, Florida to California, and California to Washington. The majority of our schools are west of the Mississippi River and comprise North and South Dakota, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona as the most number of schools, but we operate really two different kinds. Bureau-operated schools are direct supervision, like my schools in North Dakota, where I supervise the principal, and tribally controlled schools, where the BIE funds the schools, the tribes operate them, more local control, a little bit more independence. However, both school systems follow the same kind of standards and educational expectations as state-based schools. We have about 45,000 students in our system, and we also have two post-secondary institutions. SIPI, which is in Albuquerque, that stands for Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute, and Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. It's unique because Haskell also has a K-8 teacher preparation program. But today I want to focus mostly on 2020 to 2024 and the work that I've been doing with the Belcourt School District. And if you know anything about North Dakota, then you know that Belcourt is 3.5 hours north of Bismarck. It's 12 miles south of Canada. And if you hop in a side-by-side and go for a ride on the weekend, you can actually see Canada from your side-by-side. So we're very close to the border. And it's north central North Dakota in Rolette County, the poorest county in the state. But it's a beautiful place to work, full of great people and awesome students. And I want to share with you some of their accomplishments since 2020. Now, I want to begin by putting this in the correct frame so that you understand the grand shifts that we went through. First of all, we have to recognize the fact that we all survived the pandemic. And it really was the pandemic and the need to cause students to learn quickly and faster that helped us to come to this shift. And as a group of administrators in 2021, when we were returning back to school and relying less and less on virtual and distance instruction, we started wondering, what is it that helps us survive? What causes us to be resilient? And what do we need to bring into our school improvement planning and thinking that is going to reestablish culture and climate and identity and belonging and desire to school? So after many conversations, we came to the 7 teachings of the Anishinaabe people, which is part of the culture of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. And what you see here on the screen are those 7 grandfather teachings: wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. And in our school system here in Belcourt with the Turtle Mountain, we are a cooperative system representing pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, over 6 campuses, 2,200 students, and about 560 staff members. And together, we are the largest employment education entity or enterprise in the entire county. So we are quite powerful in Rolette County, and we're a big part of the North Dakota education system. And I want to begin with wisdom, because when we started asking ourselves as administrators and school leaders, what do we need to do in order to cause students to learn more quickly and begin closing that achievement gap that was a result of being out of school due to the pandemic and not having face-to-face instruction in a physical environment? Then we had to look to ourselves for the answers. And we knew, based on history, because the BIE was quite successful with direct instruction many years ago, that direct instruction could bring us to a level of achievement and accomplishment in a short amount of time. And I want to share some of those results with you, just as evidence, because the Bureau of Indian Education participated in the Reading First grant initiative that came out in 2004 all the way up to 2009. And we involved roughly 48, 49 of our schools. And Turtle Mountain Elementary School was one of the most successful implementers of that initiative. And their success really was grounded on this graphic here. All of these pieces had to be in place and come into play in order for schools to be successful. There's 4 pillars here, where there's state leadership, leadership and coaching at the local school level, professional development, and technical assistance. Without those 4 things in place, the schools in Reading First, BIE Reads, or Math Counts really struggled to demonstrate success. Now, as a system, the BIE also included assessment and data management as required practices for the schools, and we made suggestions on core reading programs and required differentiated instruction. So all of the schools were involved in a walk to read model and had homogeneous grouping at student learning levels with acceleration to match the student growth. We also doubled down on instructional time and required that all schools do a 90-30-30. So initial core 1 instruction was 90 minutes long, tier 2 additional 30, tier 3 an additional 30 on top of that. And we had some schools that really had to spend a lot of time on literacy because there was a huge gap to fill in. And of course, at the end, there was evaluation and accountability because we required results, we required growth, but it wasn't in absence of the professional development and technical assistance, because those were two key pillars to the success. Near the end of the Reading First BIE Reads granting period, we started comparing the Reading First BIE schools to all of the other BIE schools. And we used the SAT-10 to make that comparison. And you can see here on this chart that those who were implementing the practices from that graphic that I just showed you were exceeding their performance on third grade proficiency as compared to the other BIE schools. And in 2008 and 2009, that was in excess of 20% in both years. So they were very high achieving schools based on the Reading First 3-tier model of instruction. Now back to Turtle Mountain in 2021, we started our journey back to the 7 teachings and incorporating that into our school improvement practices. And we realized then that love is a verb, love is an action. And in our profession as teachers, school administrators, and educators, we decided that to teach effectively is an act of love. To use the student data proficiently, it's a demonstration of love. And we knew that our staff members were committed to their students and their committed community. So all of their professional actions and decisions as educators made love a verb. It was a demonstration. And that really strengthened our understanding of the 7 teachings when we put it into those terms, because we love our students and we want them to do well and achieve high, but it's not a feeling of, oh, like, bless their heart, we love them. Oh, I feel so bad for them. It's like, no, we actually want you to learn. We're going to cause that to happen, and we're going to use the data to guide our decisions. Evidence of this act of love came to us directly from Turtle Mountain Elementary School's practice in Reading First. The year before they were a Reading First school in 2003, 2004, Turtle Mountain Elementary School referred 52 students for special education assessment. And they actually placed 31 of those 52. Now, 3 years later, after their first round of implementation of Reading First practices, where there was 3 tiers of instruction, a 90-30-30 model for instruction, professional development, technical assistance, and all of the other pieces of that first graphic I showed you, the number of students they assessed for special ed fell to 4 in 2006 and 2007, and wound up only placing 2 in special education. Now that's a dramatic shift from referring 52 down to referring 4, placing 31 down to placing 2, which begs the question, what was happening prior to Reading First, and why were all of these children being referred for special education, and some even being placed in special education at such a high rate? And I think it really boils down to significant factors coming from the community, coming from home. Limited access to literacy, limited to no access to Head Start or pre-K programs. So readiness for kindergarten really was not present. And we were not doing justice in those early years of instruction to correct those literacy difficulties with just better, clearer, more present instruction. The next grandfather teaching that I want to hit on is respect. And as we come out of the pandemic, we're thinking as administrators, we've got all of this data coming at us. We were building models of multi-tiered systems of support, thinking about 3 tiers of instruction for reading and math. And We're collecting absenteeism data, COVID-related data, infection rates, days in school, days out of school. We've got all kinds of academic data, English language arts, reading, mathematics, behavioral, social, emotional learning. I mean, we're just swimming in data. But we still had students who were at least 2 years below grade level expectations. And coming back from the pandemic, we had students, much like you all did, that had never been in a school building before the second grade. So behavior, readiness for school, behavior in school, all of those things that students learn in kindergarten, first and second grade were not present in our second and third graders when they returned from pandemic. So it was a brand new school environment, and really pulled on the skills of our teachers and our school leaders. So we had to come to that with respect, knowing that we don't have all of the immediate answers right now, and this is a problem we're going to have to work through. So let us first acknowledge that school is different for us now in 2021, 2022 than it has ever been. We looked back again in history and found results from our Reading First days, and remembered that when we were implementing our three-tier model of instruction, and we were using direct instruction, and we were teaching with fidelity and providing all kinds of professional development and technical assistance to our schools, we got some really great results. And in 2006, I believe this was announced at a national Reading First meeting, the BIE had the 5th greatest gain in reading fluency, as compared to all of the states that were participating in Reading First. We were number 5 in the country. And when this was announced, there were people in the audience who, one, didn't even know who the BIE was. They didn't know the Bureau of Indian Education operated schools. And they were quite surprised that we were so close to the top. But that was not the only surprise we got at that meeting, because the very next slide was the demonstration of the BIE having the greatest gain in comprehension proficiency. So we implemented so well that our kids in our grant recipients were the 2nd greatest in comprehension proficiency gains, just behind West Virginia. That was huge for us because, one, if you remember the Reading First time and some of the conversations and battles near the end, it wasn't supposed to impact comprehension. Or was it? Because it did for us, but it didn't other places. And that was always a question. Well, it didn't impact comprehension, but for the Bureau, it did. So we brought this knowledge into our thinking about our multi-tiered system of support here in Belcourt and the Turtle Mountain schools, knowing that we had done it once before. We could do it again. And that's where we come to a point of bravery, because our first steps in this new right direction, and I have to say new in quotations because implementing a three-tier model of instruction is not new for me, and it is not new for these schools. Turtle Mountain Elementary School had already done it and proven that they could do it again. But like anything that's new and is a challenge, we were scared to fail. We were afraid we were going to make mistakes. We were worried that we would even lose more ground as we start to implement a three-tier model of instruction. And we were kind of concerned, you know, our teachers are going to not like all of the requirements of MTSS. They're not going to like this new direction because it's going to take away their freedom or their creativity or their inspiration. But we had to really focus on the immediate learning needs of our students. And that's the point of bravery. When we as adults decide to do something on behalf of our students that doesn't necessarily align with our personal comfort levels, it forces us to have courage and move forward based on the data, knowing that this is going to be the best practice for our students. So you have to be brave, even when you don't have all of the answers. We also had to create things that didn't exist, like this assessment framework, because we were using so many kinds of assessment, whether it's diagnostic, formative, summative, interim. I mean, we had data and assessments coming out of our ears, And it wasn't well organized, so we had to get our instructional coaches, our assistant principals, and our principals, and our consultants all together and put it to paper and say, why are we using each kind of assessment? What are we hoping to gain from it? What does the data tell us? Where does it fit in instruction? And what's the schedule or regularity for this? Because for some, this was a brand new practice. They were not teachers whenever Reading First was in full swing, because we have some teachers are very new to the profession and they're maybe 5 years or less in their teaching career. And we had to explain it. And we wanted all of our staff and administrators to understand, where do the pieces of data fit, so that it's a comprehensive and cohesive picture for us to use. We also had to create our own data management system, because there wasn't a simple software program that we could just dump it all into, punch a button, and it's going to spit out results. Because we were using multiple kinds of assessment tools, and we got to be very good with Excel so that we could manually enter all of these numbers, group our kids, create schedules, and then begin delivering the instruction that they needed right then and there at their exact learning level, and then progress and fast forward them, accelerate them just as much as possible, so that we are closing that learning gap every single year, making more than annual growth. We're talking about catch-up growth, where students who are very far behind are learning more than 9 months of material and mastering more than 9 months of learning in a given academic year. Otherwise, you're never going to get caught up. You're just continuing the cycle of being behind. So we really focused on catch-up growth and moving the needle quickly. And we built an Excel table and continue to use it today. And now our coaches and our administrators rely on this data because it guides their thinking and planning, as well as their scheduling. The next teaching I want to cover is honesty. And for us, as a school-wide system, we have 5 schools. 2 are K-8, 1 is K-5, 1 is 6-8, 1 is 9-12. And when we started talking about MTSS, the first thing we realized is our understanding and practice of a multi-tiered system of support was going to be contrary to the majority of people, because this becomes our umbrella, and we deliberately decided to put everything that we do, academics, behavioral mental health, attendance, parent and family, student engagement, everything fits under the MTSS umbrella. That becomes our guiding framework and methodology. And that was a challenge, because so many of our school staff came to that understanding thinking that it was just another thing. It was another initiative, it was another program, it was a different grant. But we really had to focus on changing their perspective so that they understood this is how we do school now, not a grant. It's not funded, it's not supported. There's no deadline when we can stop doing these effective practices, but this is how we deliver instruction. And this is how we prepare and respond for students who arrive in our system. And it was a challenge for everybody at the school, teachers, paraprofessionals, instructional coaches, and principals. We really had to remaster the knowledge, skills, and ability of everyone so that they could move fluidly through the MTSS process and begin to see where they're being the most effective and what needs additional attention, time, practice, or effort. And just be honest about it. We let the data guide our practice, to let the data guide our decisions. And if we were not hitting the target, then we had to go back and reevaluate and make a new decision and study the results of that decision. So it became a continuous cycle of plan, do, study, act that leads to success. And now I get to share with you just a little bit of that success. I told you in school year 20 and 21, this is when we were coming back to school, coming out of virtual instruction, and Turtle Mountain Schools was one of the school systems in North Dakota that stayed out of school the longest because of the pandemic. You know, here in this school system, we really have three bosses to answer to. We have the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians, the tribe. We have the Bureau of Indian Education, that's the federal. And then we have the state of North Dakota, because our schools are cooperative schools. So they're like 50% state funded, 50% BIE funded, makes us very large and complex, giving us two official bosses. And then there is the tribe, who has the needs of their students and their community front and center. So we're trying to balance all three of those aspects, and it caused us to stay out of school a little longer than most school systems in North Dakota in 20 and 21. So you can see there that our orange rate of growth in 21 was very small, 15%, 11% in math. However, once we started our three-tier model of instruction for school year 21-22, look at the dramatic jump at the elementary level. We went from 15% in English language arts up to 45%, and from 11% in math up to 49%. And this is just growth. Now, this is not how many were proficient or advanced. This is from point A to point B. How much did they grow in 1 year's time? And it's absolutely phenomenal, because in 21-22, that was their first year of implementation of an MTSS model. Now, 22-23, the elementary school exceeds the state in growth, which is exactly where we want to be, because now we are starting to make catch-up growth, not just annual growth. We're actually exceeding in both English language arts and math. And the unique thing here is in 22-23, the math model for the elementary school really had not started, but it was a collateral benefit, an extra benefit, because we were doing so well in literacy that students are actually doing better in math too. Middle school is a great place here in Turtle Mountain. They are uniquely different from most middle schools because they're a 6-8 environment. But when they started their three-tier model in 21-22, they very quickly realized that they needed a three-tier model for math too. So by the end of the instruction in 2022, they decided to expand and do a dual implementation for MTSS in both English language arts and math. So now they're doing 3 tiers of instruction in both content areas at the middle school level. Unique because most people assume by then it is too late. It's too late to do anything for those students who are so far behind, but that is absolutely not true. Remediation is possible all the way through high school. It just takes a lot of work. This slide also speaks to the level of commitment and practice at the middle school level, because they exceeded the state in both 22 and 23 by a huge margin. And I'm expecting in 24, the results from this past school year, they will be exceeding the state once again, because they are so locked on and keyed in with their use of data, their grouping of students, and delivery of instruction very closely aligned with students' learning readiness and level of ability. Coupled with acceleration, meaning you have to move forward, you've got to learn a lot while you are at middle school. Their ultimate goal is to take a 6th grader coming in, keep them in instruction for 3 years, and have them entirely caught up, ready for 9th grade when they leave. We come to this work with a lot of humility. First of all, we know we do not have all of the answers, and we source what we don't know with outside experts. We also don't have all of the tools, but we do have enough drive and ambition that it's going to cover the gaps, meaning we will go and find the answer. We cannot sit and wait and wish that someone would bring the answer to us. The other thing that we learned, and something that I frequently tell the schools, the leaders, and the educators, is we are the ones that our ancestors dreamed about and prayed for. We are tasked with doing the work. It's our skills as professionals that are going to cause today's children to be successful tomorrow, thereby ensuring the strength of all of our sovereign nations. It's our job. It's the ancestors were praying for us. We're here now as adults. We're the decision makers. We're the action takers. We're fully responsible. So if it doesn't happen with us, it's not going to happen with anyone after us. That's a huge point of humility, because that's a lot of responsibility. You know, that's like putting the boulder on your shoulders and carrying it every single day. But that's what we agreed to. That's what it means to be an educator in Turtle Mountain. Now, of course, we had our own problems with status quo and wanting to do things the same way that they've always been done, or trying to find excuses that keep adults comfortable. And that's what these excuses here on the screen represent. You know, these are things that I've actually heard from professionals in the past, be it reading first days or most recent, coming back to school after the pandemic. And all of that, in my mind, is an adult excuse to stay in your comfort zone, doing the things that you've always done, getting the results that you've always gotten, but sometimes wishing for better, sometimes wishing for more, but not willing to put in more effort or to try something different or to learn a new practice and strategy that is probably more effective than what you've been doing for the past 30 years. So I don't live in the status quo. I don't let the school stay in the status quo. And every now and then we have to have a really big meeting about data and student performance and outcomes. And I challenge them with the status quo and say, we're not living there anymore. We've learned too much. We have the data. We know what works. Now we're going to do the work so that we can have the results and students can be successful, because that's what our job is as a school system. We educate kids so that kids can make choices about their life. Education is the key to choice. And finally, we come to truth. We knew from the very beginning, way back before the pandemic, we were starting from behind because of historical trauma, generational trauma, poverty, rurality, our geographic location, our limited access to resources in the far north, North Dakota, the difficulty of getting certain professional services to come to our school, whether it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language pathology, you know, things that people who are educators in metropolitan areas don't always struggle with because the professional is just right out the door across the street or down the road. We really have to work hard to bring those resources and services into our school system and do it consistently. So we knew that we were behind, but we also knew that we could not live there. We could not stay there. We had no desire to kind of set up shop and just camp out in this place of low student achievement. Student and staff attendance were problematic coming back from school because we had built new habits where, you know, being out of school and being passed forward was not a good thing. And we had to really challenge that. We also knew that as we changed instructional programs and scheduling of students, that professionals, teachers and paraprofessionals, were going to struggle with the learning curve of new instructional programs and new instructional routines. But we could provide professional development and coaching to support that and technical assistance, so that as long as adults were willing to learn about, question, use, challenge the system for three-tier model of instruction and MTSS, and be willing to live in that environment of not having all of the answers immediately, but work towards a solution every single day, then we were going to be just fine. We would use the data to drive our decisions, to support our school improvement efforts, and always focus on the end result. What do we want for students to be able to know, do, and understand at the end of instruction? And finally, we come to achievement. This is the elementary school across the same 3 years that was on their growth slides. And notice how their orange bars are increasing in English language arts and math over that 3-year period. School year ending 21, there was no MTSS, there was no 3-tier model of instruction. 22 was their first year of implementation. 23 is the second year of implementation. Small bumps in English language arts performance in those 2 school years, 22 and 23. Not as large and dramatic as I'd like to see, but moving in the right direction. Now, I know their 3-tier model of instruction struggled a little bit in year 1 and year 2 with some supply issues, some training concerns, and then questions about fidelity and teacher uptake of the new model and instructional program. But as a side benefit, even when we weren't paying much attention to math, we were still growing in our proficiency in math. Went up from 6% to 9% and 14%. And in 23, they started focusing more on math. Similar story, but much more dramatic results at the middle school. Same 3-year period, started their MTSS journey in 22, really focusing on English language arts. And they moved from 25% the year prior in 21 up to 33%. Proficient and advanced, and then 39%. I mean, closing that gap ever so slightly and so much more between 22 and 23. And I expect the results for 24 to be equally high, if not exceeding the state. Because they started their math implementation in 23. So they were duly implementing a 3-tier model for English language arts and mathematics in 23. In the end, I was having a conversation with a colleague not too long ago about Anita Archer's I do, we do, you do instructional routine. And we got to thinking about how does that apply to Indigenous life? And thinking about things that we learned as children and have been taught as tribal members since time immemorial. I do, we do, you do, as a model of instruction even for Indigenous people. Because we didn't turn our youth out on the plains and say, go catch a buffalo. We didn't give them a bow and arrow and a horse and say, bring back dinner. We actually taught them how to do that. All the steps needed to build arrows, build a bow, how to go and hunt, how to kill the buffalo, how to process the buffalo, how to share it out to the tribe. We didn't take them to the medicine gathering grounds and say, go and pick herbs and medicines. You actually had to be shown by somebody who knew which plants were medicinal and what were they used for, and how do you prepare those plants for use in medicine and ceremony. And our Indigenous way of life was rooted in I do, we do, you do. There was someone in the tribe who filled that I do role, whether they were the hunter, the cultural leader, the medicine man, the medicine woman, the ceremony keeper. And you would go and learn from them in a we do situation where they were explaining and demonstrating and helping you to build your knowledge for using these elements from the natural world, until finally you reach a point of mastery and understanding that the teacher would tell you, you do it now. You go and hunt the buffalo. You go and gather the medicines. You go and prepare the ceremony. So that's the final thing that I want to leave you with today. I do, we do, you do are Indigenous. And it is a pleasure to say that direct instruction has made a huge difference in the learning and achievement and outcomes of my Indigenous students. Here's my contact information. If you'd like to reach out and ask questions, share more, please send me an email, give me a phone call. I'm more than happy to discuss our success and to continue building a relationship around the use of direct instruction, the use of direct instruction programs to close achievement gaps with students. So thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you the best of luck in your direct instruction endeavors.